In previous videos, I'm working my way through the book of Job. Especially, we've done the prologue of Job in chapters 1 and 2, and also chapter 3, Job's first monologue. We have also done chapter 28, the great section on where do we find wisdom? And it's in the fear of God, Yirat Adonai. And then we came to the speeches of the Lord, and we've been tracking that beginning in chapter 38 through now chapter 42. And at this point, we are in the epilogue. And so basically, I'm going to finish the book of Job at this point. We've tried to look at every phrase and every word that we could grammatically, looking at and parsing and identifying the variant forms, and also doing a brief commentary. So I'm going to finish today, and that is the epilogue of Job 42:7 to 17. And I hope that maybe some might be able to follow in your Hebrew scriptures along with me as we have done this study. So we're at verse 7. Vayehi achar diber Adonai el hadevarim ha'ela el Iyov vayomer Adonai el Eliphaz ha-Temani hara api b'cha u'vishnei re'echa ki lo dibartem elai nechona ke'avdi Iyov. So as we read it, and it came to pass after the Lord had spoken. Notice diber is your PL perfect, third masculine singular from davar. So after the Lord had spoken these words, hadevarim ha'ela el Iyov, unto Job, vayomer Adonai el, and the Lord said to Eliphaz, Temanite, the Temanite, hara api v'cha, my wrath is kindled against you. Notice hara again is a verb looking at God's wrath that is kindled against Eliphaz now for what he had spoken. Uvishne re'echa, and your two friends, kilo dibartim elai, for you have not spoken. Notice you have not spoken concerning me that which is right, as my servant Job. Notice here dibartim is from dabar. It is a PL, perfect, second person masculine plural from dabar. Notice the I vowel and the doubling of the middle radical in the bait gives it away as a PL stem. You have not spoken nechona, that which is right. This is from the root kun. It's a nifel participle, feminine, singular from kun. So you have not spoken that which is right, as my servant Job. Notice here, Job was willing to confess and speak that which is right. So far, Eliphaz had not. And so as we move into this epilogue, the verses are going to conclude the book of Job, like we said, and they are written in prose. Both the prologue and the epilogue written in prose. We've seen the beautiful poetry up to this point. And now he speaks to Eliphaz. Eliphaz is singled out because he seems to have been the leader of the three friends. The other two simply echoed his thoughts in their speeches, and their sentiments are not true, are not right. Their attitude towards Job is unkind. They use false arguments to justify Job's suffering, even though they thought that they were speaking for God. He reproves them as speaking really not according to him. The theme of the book is demonstrated here then. The suffering is not the result of sin. Job was, uh, Job had spoken correctly with respect to his friends and their argument. He did deny their theory and that he was a hypocrite and was suffering because of his wickedness. That part was correct. Also, his repentance. Job did not speak correctly, though, with respect to God. But since he was repentant, God speaks of him as being right. That seems to be the thought of what is going on. Then, as we move on to the next verse, he is now to offer a sacrifice. Notice verse 8. V'ata kechu lachem shiv'a farim v'shiv'a elim ulechul el abdi Yob v'ha'alitem ola ba'avdechem v'Iyov abdi yitpalel alechem ki im panav esa levilti asot imachem nevala ki lo dibartim elai nechona ke'abdi Iyov. So as we read this verse, as we go through it, notice, and now therefore, take for yourselves, God is speaking to Eliphaz and the others, take for yourselves 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go unto my servant Job. Notice ulechu is from chalak. So go, and here we have an imperative, cow imperative, masculine plural. So go unto my servant Job, and you shall offer up the ha'alitim olah. Notice here, Allah means to offer up, and go and offer up. Here we have a hifil, perfect, second masculine plural from Allah, a final lamed hey verb that was an original, probably final yod, and that yod is reappearing in this hifil form. So offer up a burnt offering, and notice here, offer up for yourselves, ba'adhem, and Job, my servant, shall pray, yitpalel, for you. Notice yitpalel is from the root palal, to pray. Here we have a hitpael, imperfect, third masculine singular from palal, with the prefix yit and the pathak under the first radical of the root, the doubling of the middle consonant. And so Job, my servant, will pray for you, ki im panav esa levilti. For him I will accept. In other words, for with his face I will lift up, or for I will lift up his face. To lift up the face means to accept one, and asa means to lift up. It's from the noon verb nasa. It's the cow imperfect first person singular from nasa. So I will lift up his face, or for him will I accept, or I accept. Levilti asot imachem nevalah, that I not do with you something that is disgraceful, nevalah. In other words, by bringing a judgment, further judgment, or judgment to you. Notice asot is your infinitive construct from asa, that I might not do with you, nevala, that which might a disgraceful thing for you, I think is God's point here. Ki lo dibartim, for you have not spoken elai nechona, concerning me that which is right. Notice here, nechuna is from kun again. Here we have a nifal participle, feminine singular from kun, as my servant Job. In other words, Job will offer a sacrifice for you, is the point here, and pray for you, lest you face my judgment, the Lord is saying. It is interesting, Job appears in verse 8 to have lived before the establishment of the Levitical priesthood. Fathers served as priests for their families, sometimes as intercessory mediators. We see this, for example, in Genesis 20:17. So God commands Elihu, or Eliphaz, and his friends to expiate themselves by offering up a sacrifice. Job, God's servant, would intercede for them in their impious words. This seems to be what the thought of verse 8 is. So then we move on to verse 9. Vayilchu Eliphaz ha-Temani, Ubildad ha-Shuhi, Zophar ha-Naamati, Vaya asu ka-asher diber alehem Adonai, Vayisa Adonai et panei Iyov. So Eliphaz, the Temanite, and Bildad, the Shuhite, and Zophar, the Naamatite, they went, and they did as the Lord had spoken unto them. And the Lord literally accepted the face of Job, or we could say accepted or lifted up the face of Job, or accepted what Job was doing for them in his prayer. Notice just a few things here. Vayelechu is from halak. The hay has elided, and we have compensatory lengthening in this cow imperfect third masculine plural verbal form. So Eliphaz and his two friends went. They did as the Lord had commanded unto them. Notice Vaya Asu from Asa. It's the cow imperfect third person plural from Asa, masculine, third masculine plural. So they did as the Lord had spoken. Diber again is your PL perfect third masculine singular from Davar unto them, and the Lord lifted up the face of Job. Vayisa from nasa, a pay noon verb, where the noon has assimilated into the scene, yinsa becoming uh, uh, yisa with the doubling of the scene. So the Lord lifted up the face of Job. That is, he accepted what Job did in his prayer. And so then we go on, God's acceptance of that prayer, as Job had prayed on behalf of his three so-called friends. God did accept his prayer and forgave them. This is what the verse is saying. So then as we move on to the next verse, we began to see how the Lord now has blessed Job. Notice Shav et Sheviot Iyov, Vahit Palalo Va'ad Re'ehu, Vayosef Adonai et Kol Asher LeIyov Lamashne. That is, and the Lord returned, we could say, the fortune of Job when he prayed on behalf of his friends. And then the Lord added or increased all which belonged to Job in a double way, in a twofold way. Notice here, as we look at this particular verse, the Adonai Shav, the Lord changed, we could say, the fortune of Job, or return. This is from Shuv, a Cal perfect, third masculine singular. So the Lord returned. And then Sheviot here, this particular word, it comes from Shevit, and it means fortune. It's sort of like the Lord returned what Job had had and more. So the Lord returned the fortune of Job when he prayed, the hit palal, in his praying. And I'm understanding this as a hit pael infinitive construct with the pronominal suffix, third masculine singular in the O, and the bait here, the inseparable preposition. So reading the phrase together, when he prayed on behalf of his friends. And then Vayosef, the Lord increased or caused to increase. This is from Yasaf. So the Lord increased. I'm understanding this as a hifil imperfect. A hifil stem, a hifil perfect, third masculine singular from Yasaf. So the Lord increased all which Job had, or all which was to Job twice, or double. And then in verse 11, we continue. Notice, though, here, God returns Job's prosperity and he doubles it by doubling it. And so the writer wants us to know that Job's end was better really than his beginning. So then as we move on to verse 11, it reads, Vayavohu elav kol echav v'chol achyotav v'chol yodaav lefanim v'yochalu imo lechem b'veito v'yagudu lo v'yanachamu oto al kol ha'ra'a asher hevi Adonai alav v'yitanu lo ish keshita achat v'ish Nezim Zahav Echad. So, reading this, then there came unto him all of his brethren. Remember, they had abandoned him, and now they have come back. Notice Yavohu is from Bo. It's the cow imperfect, third person plural, masculine plural from Bo with a vav consecutive or a vav conversive. So there came unto him all of his brethren and all his sisters, uh, and all those who were his, uh, all those who knew him, those who had been his acquaintances. Notice Yoda'av is from Yada. It is a participle, a cow participle, masculine plural, with the pronominal suffix third person singular in the av here in the final vav. So all those that knew him before, that is all of his acquaintances, and they ate with him bread, or they ate bread with him. Notice vayochalu is from achal, to eat. It's a pay aleph verb, and those pay aleph verbs like vayomer always have the o vowel at the very beginning instead of the I vowel, like in Yishmor. If we were using the verb shamar, vayishmor, something like that. So we have an o vowel, and they ate with him bread in his house. And notice in the next phrase, vayanudu lo, and they mourned for him. Notice this is from nude, the middle weak verb, and it's a cow uh, imperfect, third masculine plural from nude. So they mourned for him. Another vav consecutive as well. Vaya, vaya nachamu. Vaya nachamu is from the root nacham, to comfort, and they comforted him. Notice here we have a PL, imperfect, third masculine plural, or third person plural from, yes, masculine plural from nacham, and they comforted him. And that vav is a vav hafek, turning it over again. They comforted him concerning all al kol hara'ah, all the evil, asher hevi Adonai alav, which the Lord had caused to come upon him. Notice this is from Bo. Here we have a Hifil perfect, third masculine singular from Bo, which the Lord had caused to come upon him. And notice, and he gave, they gave to him. Every man also gave him. So literally, vayitanu lo, they gave to him each, or each gave to him. Notice yitanu is from Natan. It's the cow imperfect, third person masculine plural from Natan. So a third, yes. So they gave to him. It's a pay noon verb. Notice the noon has assimilated into the tav by progressive assimilation. Yin to nu, becoming yit to nu. So they gave to him each keshita achat. Keshitat is an unknown unit of money, of value. We're not exactly sure what that amount was. So we could probably understand it simply a piece of money that they gave, one piece of money. And ish nezem zahav achad. So they gave him a piece of money, and every one each a ring of gold, or a gold ring. So notice each one is giving him money and a gold ring, looking again at the reversal of what he had gone through earlier in the book in his suffering. As I'm looking at this verse, it is interesting that Job's troubles had caused the breakdown in relationships with his family. And often that can happen in life with different troubles. These return when he regains his health and prosperity. And so he feasted, his family feasted with him as a token of their renewed friendship. In other words, there's this return to normalcy, and the gift of money. They gave him gifts of uncoined silver to express joy at his regained prosperity. So we see the Lord reversing what had happened. Then we come to verse 12. Adonai berak et acharit Iyov me reshito vayehi lo arba'a asa elef son v'sheshet alafim gemalim ve'elef semed bakar ve'elef ato atonot. Excuse me. Notice it says, so the Lord blessed the latter end, we could say, of Job more than the former, or more than the beginning, more than his beginning, we could say. And he had, or literally there was to him, so he had 14,000 sheep and 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she asses. So we can see he has grown in prosperity. So again, the text is teaching that the Job was being given exactly the double of what he originally had. And when you compare this with chapter 1, verse 3, it is the exact double of what he had. And so we move on then to verse 13, and it reads about his family as well. Vayehilo shiv'ana banim ushalosh banot. That is, and there belonged to him, or there was to him, we could say, 7 sons and 3 daughters. Vayehi again from Haya, cow imperfect, third masculine singular, from the root Haya with the Vav conversive. There was to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. And so he has the same number of children as before his calamity, 7 sons and 3 daughters. His wife is not mentioned in this chapter. The last reference to his wife is in chapter 19, verse 17. So then we come to the names of the daughters in the next verse. Vayikra Shem ha'achat Yemima, v'Shem ha'shenit Ketziyah, v'Shem ha'shelishit Keren ha'puk. Notice these names that he gives them are somewhat interesting. They possibly symbolize their beauty. Uh, the first one uh, has to do with dove. That would be, he called them Yemima, the first one, meaning dove. The second one, uh, Ketsia, seems to mean like cassia, which is an aromatic herb. We see this, for example, in Psalm 45, verse 8. And then the last um, is the third is the kerem hapuk, the we could horn literally of eye paint. And again, probably looking at their beauty and naming them in this way. And so verse 15 then reads, Velo nimsa nashim yafot kivnot Iyov b'chol ha'aretz vayetain lahim avihim nachala b'tok achechem. That is, and there was not found uh, wives or women. There was not found women so beautiful or so fair as the sons of Job in all the land. And their father gave to them inheritance among their brethren. Notice Nimsa is from Matzah. It's a nifal, perfect, third masculine singular from Matzah. So there was not found women in all the land as fair, Yafot, as the daughters of Job. And he gave to them Vayetain from Natan. Notice another pay noon verb again, use of that verb, where the noon has assimilated into the tav, Yintain becoming Yitain. And he gave to them inheritance among their brethren. And then finally, we come to verses 16 and 17. Notice verse 15, though, it's interesting. It was unusual in the ancient Middle East for women to receive a part of the inheritance unless there were no sons. We see this, for example, in Numbers chapter 27, verse 8. So Job's decision to do this indicates again, no doubt, his great wealth, and he's passing this on to his daughters. Then we come to verse 16. Vayehi Iyov acharei zot me'a ve'arba'im shana vayireh et banav ve'et b'nei banav arba'a dorot. That is, and after this, after all of this, Job lived 140 years. Vayar is the way I think this needs to be rendered. Vayar, and he saw his sons and the sons of his sons for 4 generations. In other words, he basically was blessed with long life, and he saw not only his sons, but his sons' sons for 4 generations. So we're concluding on a high note here. The person who lived long enough to see this many descendants had divine favor. We see this, for example, in Genesis 50:23, in Psalm 128 and verse 6, and in Proverbs 17, verse 6. Such was the case of Job under God's blessing, one full of great pleasure from the Lord. And so we conclude with verse 17. Vayamat Eyob Zakein Ushava Yamin. That is, so Job died, old and full of days, or satiated of days. Notice Sava is in construct with Yamin, meaning satiated or full of days. And Vayamat from Mod, a cow imperfect, third masculine singular from Mod. So Job died being old and full of days. So what an amazing book. I've enjoyed working through this book. It certainly is a classic. And as I've thought about the different classics of literature, as Homer is classic as the Greek classic and his writings, and Virgil in Latin, like the Aeneid, for example, and Dante in Italian, you would have to say that the Hebrew book of Job is a classic from a literary perspective of equal value with any of these, and I personally would say even a greater. I mean, I would put it number one. To me, it's amazing working, especially the Hebrew, working through the Hebrew text in this great book. It is a literary classic. And what people have said about the book of Job is certainly proven to be true. It's an amazing, amazing book from a literary perspective alone, as well as being part of God's Word. Just to review what I started at the beginning, I'm quoting on Roman numeral 13 in that page, under the Somsino Bible commentary on Job, where it says, the book of Job is really got to be one of the world's masterpieces. And the writer gives several examples of the greatness of Job. Reichart gives several examples. Notice he writes, unnumbered scholars, poets, philosophers, critics in generation after generation have delighted to bestow upon this product of the Hebrew religious genius the accolade of reverent homage. Professor George Foot Moore of Harvard University summarizes the universal testimony of these comprehensive and superlative words. The book of Job is the greatest work of Hebrew literature that has come down to us, and one of the greatest poetical works of the world's literature. And the Matterhorn of the Old Testament, says Professor Charles Foster Kent in unfeigned astonishment. And Tennyson and Carlyle spoke of it with bated breath, great as the summer midnight, as the world with its seas and stars. There is nothing written, I think, in the Bible or out of it of equal merit. A noble book, all men's book. It is our first oldest statement of the never-ending problem, man's destiny and God's ways with him here in this earth. And William Blake drew from its lines the inspiration for his mystic art and so forth. So uh, even Robert Frost, America's leading poet, demonstrated anew the unimpaired vitality of its meaning in his Mosque of Reason, and so forth. So it just goes on, and it's the drama of the human soul. That is, why do the righteous suffer? And in reality, the friends are all wrong. They think the righteous are suffering because they weren't righteous. That is, because Job must have been a wicked man, must have been a sinner. And the whole book of Job is to speak to the contrary, against that traditional idea that if the Lord is favoring you, you'll have health and wealth and everything will be beautiful. This is just the opposite. And I think one of the sad things today often is sometimes preachers will preach a wealth and health kind of gospel. When you read a book like Job, it, I think, addresses that by saying no. I mean, there's suffering that we cannot explain. I think that's the whole point of the book of Job. And as a Christian minister, as I've said many times in this, in my work, working through the grammar and each word, uh, when I look at the New Testament, uh, Jesus was the ultimate example of suffering. He went to the cross so that to die for the sins of the world, so that whosoever believes in him can have everlasting life. And so suffering is something that we know why Christ suffered, but we know that when we go through suffering, that we may not understand it, but that he has promised to be with us, whatever uh, whatever happens, and that brings great encouragement to me. I'm reminded of Romans 8, where it says, "Nothing can ever sever us from the love of God, which is in Jesus Christ." So, what a great book! And I would encourage anyone to read it in Hebrew. If you could learn Hebrew to read it, it's just it's a marvelous book dealing with that theme of suffering.